Good morning, everybody. So this morning I want to talk about a story that you all have probably heard. And this is the story about the blind men trying to discern what an elephant is, having never seen an elephant. And so basically the story is that several blind men are feeling up various parts of the elephant, and they are saying what they think the elephant is, depending on the part that they felt. Now, this story is really popular in Southeast Asia because they have elephants, and it was a story told by the Jains and the Buddhists and the Hindus, etc. So the story has a kind of appeal, I think, to it. So, none of the men who were feeling, they were all men in the story, but women works for us too. None of the blind men, of course, had ever seen an elephant, so they didn't know what an elephant looked like. And so one of the guys, he was feeling the tusk, and he said, "Well, gosh, an elephant is sharp, like a blade." And then another one was feeling the air and said, elephants are like fans. And then in the story, the very similes are there. The elephant's a jar, it's a winnowing basket, it's like a plowshare, it's the pole of a plow, a granary. I guess they were feeling the elephant's legs. A granary, a post, a mortar, a pestle, not quite sure where those came from, and a broom, of all things. Maybe that was the very tail end of the elephant, the tail. The bottom of elephants sometimes have that little puffy part down at the bottom of the tail. But, since they didn't know what a whole elephant looked like, and they were just going on these little bits and parts of the elephant, none of them really accurately described, none of these similes actually described what an elephant looks like. So in the Buddhist version, the blind men, they all get in a fight with each other after they've described the elephant. So they're all tussling around. No, it's a broom. No, it's a mortar. No, it's a pestle. No, an elephant is a fan. So all of them are carrying on about what an elephant is. And then Shakyamuni Buddha says, in the Buddhist version of the story, he says, with regard to these things, they're attached. In other words, they're attached to their viewpoint. So in regard to these things, they're attached. They quarrel and fight, only seeing one side. So that's what the Buddha had to say about this story. Now, the kind of moral of the story, if we don't get it from what the Buddha said, is that humans have a tendency, which I think I certainly have experienced, we have a tendency to build our world and come to feel that this world that we've built in our minds is an objective truth. And sometimes, maybe often, we'll have to decide, sometimes, maybe often, that truth is based on a limited and subjective experience. And thereby we miss the totality of the situation of what's being discussed. So what I'd like to do is point out what I think are common shared experiences for all of these folks who were trying to describe an elephant based on looking at the parts, which I would say also are true for ourselves as well. Okay, first of all, none of the people who were trying to describe an elephant by feeling its parts knew what an elephant looked like. So that was the first problem. The other thing is that when we do something, understandably, each one of them had his own life experience. So in Buddhism, we would say our causal experiences are karmic experiences. And so therefore, those experiences deeply affected how each one of those people saw the part of the elephant or thinking about the elephant as a whole. The third one is that each one of them believes that the part that they are seeing of the elephant is true. So they may deny the possibility that the other people who were describing the elephant, that their truth was not true, that the only truth was the truth of the individual who was speaking. It's kind of a convoluted sentence, but I think you get my gist here. The next thing that I think is common is that each person feels the need to piece together and come up with an opinion about what's transpired in the process of exploring the elephant. Now, what I'm going to do is go through every one of these things and talk about it in more depth. The fifth thing is that each one describes the elephant based on something they already know. So it's a frame of reference that they already have. And they use that to inform themselves about what it is, what an elephant is. And then the other part is that each one is looking to deny the truth of another blind person, which is kind of ironic. So they're denying each other's truth, and they're trying to define the nature of what they're experiencing based on their own truth, which is also the truth of a person who can't see the whole of the elephant. And then lastly, if it is, in this case, they're willing to have a fight about it. So they're these learned scholars, as they're portrayed in the story. I can imagine them all sitting around, fighting with each other, tussling on the ground in their robes over the fact that they didn't agree with each other and couldn't come to some kind of consensus about what this object was that they were trying to, very large object that they were trying to figure out. I think that's kind of amusing. All right, so let's break this down and look at these different parts. Okay, none of them has seen the whole elephant. I think that's like the beginning of this story that I like, is that none of them knows what a whole elephant looks like. So this ultimately is the key to understanding the elephant, is knowing what an elephant actually looks like. And so what do we do if we've not seen the whole elephant? I think that's a question we have to ask ourselves. In Buddhism, the whole elephant would be understanding the nature of reality itself, and through that understanding, having that inform our actions. And I would say, from my point of view and understanding, is that means that at that point, we are going to engage in skillful, beneficial actions for each other and help alleviate the suffering of ourselves and others through being able to see the whole elephant. So how we do this in Buddhism is that we receive teachings. These teachings have been passed down from the time of Shakyamuni Buddha until the present day. We receive teachings, we come together as a Sangha, we work together with our teachers who are the transmitters of the living transmitter of this whole elephant as best that they can within the context of what they understand, in conjunction with their teachers, their lineage, all the things that they've been taught about the Dharma. So, and that we have faith in these teachings, and that which includes, by the way, in Buddhism, faith in teachings includes actually checking it out. So we would check out the whole elephant, what this description is, what we check out. How does this work in relationship to my whole of my life? Does it seem to make sense? And sometimes, like for example, if somebody says to you, you're trying to alleviate your suffering by running up the balance on your credit card, and actually that's probably going to lead to suffering. But if you're convinced that running up the balance on your credit card is not a problem, And I guess if you're rich, maybe it's not, but if you're just a regular person, maybe it is a problem, like your interest is 18%, et cetera, et cetera. But initially, you're trying to solve a problem, and the problem is that you're suffering, and you think if you buy a lot of stuff, you're not going to suffer as much. And then you run up your credit card bill, and then you find out, oh my gosh, this did not alleviate my suffering. As a matter of fact, it created suffering. I'm like suffering more than I was before because I've got all these creditors calling me on the phone, et cetera, et cetera. Now, so this to me is analogous to saying in the Four Noble Truths, there is a suffering, there is a cause of suffering, and the cause of suffering is getting something you don't want, wanting something you can't get, and being really attached to your point of view, as these guys were who were feeling the elephant. But initially, you may not think that that is a source of suffering. So you've just got to do it, and then you find out, oh my goodness, actually this is a source of suffering. So initially, there is this faith side of this, but it should be borne out through your own experience that this teaching is actually true. So that's how Buddha talked about understanding the nature of faith in Buddhism. Okay, so none of them have seen the whole elephant. So in the parable, Shakyamuni Buddha defines the situation as being a cause of suffering through people being attached to their point of view. So he's saying that, if we can't see the whole of this, and we're going to be really attached to our view, then that's a problem. So a kind of analogy to this would be if you had some kind of physical problem, you would probably go to a trusted medical professional to diagnose your problem, and rather than relying on hearsay, for example, about how to deal with your problem. Or for example, if you wanted to know how to train to be a master furniture maker, you would go and talk to someone who is a master furniture maker, so that you didn't base your idea of how to become a master furniture maker on an experience of someone who actually has not done that process. So that seems to me that's the way that we find out what the whole picture is, what the actual elephant looks like. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is each of them had their own life experience. So they have these causal experiences. They have certain karma, we all have certain experiences that are going to color the way we understand the nature of what it is that we're experiencing at every given moment and what it is that we're trying to define. So that's our whole life experience, which includes our culture, our personal history. Perhaps it includes trauma that's going to inform our understanding or experience. Like, for example, people who come back from war zones with PTSD and they hear a car backfire and throw themselves on the ground because they think it's an IUD. So this is a perfectly understandable response to hearing a car backfire. But if you didn't have that causal conditioning, if you didn't have that karma, if you will, you would maybe have a totally different experience. You probably would. Or if you're somebody who lives in a neighborhood where people are shooting each other and you hear a car backfire, then maybe you think somebody's shooting at you. So it makes perfect sense that you would have this response, but it's actually not what's happening in that moment. Okay, so all of these things are going to, inform our experience. So that's another reason why we might be upset with someone when or not like a person, where somebody else thinks that person is swell. They're the best thing since sliced bread. So all of our personal experiences are going to come into play when we're trying to figure something out, which is why when the blind men felt the elephant, why one of them said, even though he's feeling the elephant's leg, let's say, and he says, well, this is like a pillar. But somebody else might say, this is like a tree. Or somebody else might say, this is like a big column down at the courthouse. So it's all going to be based on our own experience. And I tell you, I had a kind of a epiphany one time at San Francisco Zen Center. There was a guy that people really liked. Everybody liked this guy, but I didn't like him. And the reason I didn't like him was because I knew, at that point I was treasurer at San Francisco Zen Center, so I was one of the officers of the corporation, and I knew that this person owed San Francisco Zen Center money, and that they were not paying Zen Center back. So I considered them to be, well, at that point I thought the guy's pretty dishonest and was being pretty slippery about this. Okay, so my knowledge, my causes and conditions caused me to judge this person in a certain way. But I remember one day I was standing in the dining room at City Center, and all these people were talking to him and really liking him. And I'm like, I had this thought, I thought to myself, well, what's going on here that I think this guy is a total jerk and everybody else thinks he's a wonderful, wonderful person? Like, what am I missing here? That's what I asked myself. And I realized that I was disliking this person based on one particular experience that I had, or one particular view that I had about him that they didn't have. But nevertheless, when I dropped that view and actually looked at this person, I realized that they were kind, and they were always happy, and they were always supportive of other people. And so I realized, yes, this picture that I had of this person was an erroneous judgment, because I wasn't taking in the whole of the elephant in this situation. So that was a kind of a awakening for me about being willing to look at the whole of a situation, not just look at some narrow view that I had of that particular situation. So I realized, I thought, you can't do this. And so really, yeah, would I lend money to this person? Well, probably not. But does that mean that I should jettison everything about them based on my knowledge of them? No, I think that would be an erroneous judgment. So that was the realization that I came to about this. Could I see this person as a whole person who is both charming and a good friend, but also struggled with his relationship with money, that also wasn't, that I could hold both of those things at the same time? So I think that that's one way that we can talk about this within the context of our personal experiences that we bring. So I think we should ask ourselves, can I see the whole of the situation? And then look out for the possibility that I might be basing my opinions on a faulty premise because I can't see the whole of the situation at any given time. I'm not aware of the totality of the elephant. Like, for example, maybe this person had been talking to the teachers, and maybe this person had worked something out that I didn't know about, that was personal, that was confidential with the teachers. And so I just wasn't privy to that. Okay, the third one is that each of them believes the part they are seeing is the truth. So they are inclined to deny the possibility that there are other views or truths other than their own. So I think we all get caught in this too. So it's problematic. And for example, we often believe that our emotions tell us something's true, and we ignore the larger picture and we don't look at it. I'll tell you something that happened to me this morning. I was sitting in Zazen, and my body was saying, it's 9:25, it's 9:25, it's 9:25. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe Randy thinks this is a 40-minute period of Zazen. And then I thought to myself, no, Randy never messes this up. I'm sure she knows that it's 9:25. And I thought, I can't look at my watch, I can't look at my watch. But then I thought, no, I'm the teacher, I can look at my watch. So I looked at my watch, and sure enough, it was like 9:15. And I said, okay, we're not looking at our watch again. Randy is going to get this right. And it was like, but my body was saying, no, it's past time, it's past time. And so I was like going, okay, calm yourself, it's okay, relax, it's gonna be all right. And what would be the worst thing if we actually went to 40 minutes? Well, maybe you all would take off, those of you guys who are online, or maybe you'd stick around for the lecture. But anyway, it wouldn't be the end of the world. So this is an example where my body sense of what the time was really coloring my experience of what was happening. So I did entertain the possibility that I might be wrong, but I did look at the whole elephant by checking my watch. So, I think this is really, really an interesting thing that we experience. I remember at City Center, I was in a lecture, and Reb Anderson said, just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. And of course, we've all heard that over and over and over again. But for some reason that day, it was like, I really got it. That for me, what was going on in my head, the little voice in your head, I hope everybody has one of these. Little voice in your head, it's good. And it's like sort of like a running monologue about like what is going on, what reality is. And it was epiphany for me to realize, just because this voice in my head has some notion of what reality is, it doesn't mean that it's true. Like, I may be wrong. Oh my God, perish the thought that little voice in my head might be wrong. So I found that to be really eye-opening, to realize that just because I thought something did not mean that it's true. So I got it, that my version of reality in my head was not necessarily the truth. It wasn't the whole elephant. That my truth is subjective. And even the parts of the view that I have may actually be hidden to me. So I might be having responses that are based on things that I don't even understand why I'm having that response. I don't understand what it is that I'm thinking. So I knew that in that case, I got it, that whatever I'm thinking may not be the whole elephant. So I needed to expand my vision, or at least question whether or not what I was thinking was the truth or the whole elephant. So that's the next one. The next one is, each person feels the need to piece together and come up with a story about what has transpired. I think this is something, human beings are meaning making. Our minds want to make meaning. We want to make up a story. And so we'll make up a story based on the facts that we have, which may or may not be the totality of the elephant. And then, so we come up with a story about what we think happened, and we kind of tend to go with that story. So in the case of the elephant seekers, who were trying to figure out what an elephant was, who were, I assume, charged with the task of coming up with a description of an elephant based on their feeling different parts of the elephant. So each one of them thought that they had come up with the true, story about the whole picture of what an elephant was. And yeah, but not quite. So like in the case of the elephant, since they had about 10 different guys out there feeling up the elephant, there were 10 different stories about what an elephant was. So they fit their story based on the part of the elephant that they were feeling. And it's interesting, and I think this is also true of us, is everybody got kind of emotionally contentious about it. Well, wait a minute, my truth is the real truth. Like the man is feeling up the ear of the elephant, says, oh, elephants are like fans. Well, we all know elephants don't look anything like a fan. And actually, when I think about it, the elephant is like a really wonderful animal for them all to be exploring the parts of, because the elephant has a lot of varied parts. Elephants are pretty large animals. And I guess the person who's standing there going like this is going, oh, the elephant is like the Great Wall of China, and the person who's doing the leg is like going, oh, the elephant is like a trunk of a tree. But of course, the point is not to get attached to all of these ideas about this story that we're making up. So what's actually really helpful is if all of the men had gotten together and discussed the elephant cooperatively. And then they might have said, this picture is so big that maybe we can't put together the totality of this picture. Like maybe we could go find somebody who actually knows what an elephant looks like, because guess what? We're blind. We can't see what the actual elephant, we can't get back far enough to have a perspective to be able to see what the elephant actually looks like. But they didn't do that. They got in a fight with each other. The next part is each describes the elephant based upon a known frame of reference, that it is like something that they already know. And this is actually quite dangerous, especially when we're studying something new, because if we say it's like something else, it may not be like something else at all. And so consequently what happens is that we've made up a story that takes us away from the actual truth of, in this case, what the elephant looks like. And then we're using an old model for a new situation. The next one is that each one is looking to another blind person for their description of the elephant, or they're denying the description of the elephant of another blind person. So that means that they're using their delusional, using a Buddhist term, they're using their delusional state of mind to define the nature of what it is that they're looking at. So this is why in Buddhism we have teachers. This is why in any kind of, I think, craft or thing that's complicated to learn, we have teachers. We go to school to learn to be a lawyer. Lawyers have long histories of cases that they look at. So anyway, there's a lot to learn if you want to be a lawyer. So if you want to be a lawyer, you have to go and look and find another lawyer who can teach you how to be a lawyer, because that lawyer, theoretically, when you go to college, go to law school, they know the big picture, at least of the field that they're teaching you. And then you get a bigger and bigger and bigger picture of what it is to be a lawyer. So in Buddhism, for example, we might say that a little knowledge about the doctrine of emptiness is dangerous because it can lead to nihilism. If we say there is no thing, nothing has an inherent existence, maybe you interpret that to mean everything is nihilistic, nothing has any point, nothing actually exists. Or we might say, if you have too little understanding of compassion, then that understanding of compassion, or let's say you have an understanding of compassion that is unrealistic, that doesn't include the discernment part of compassion, what happens is that you cultivate a kind of niceness that is what Trungpa Rinpoche liked to call idiot compassion. So this is a kind of compassion without any discernment that's problematic. So we explore and look at and try to understand the nature of what it is to say to be compassionate, what it is to say, to understand that things lack inherent existence. And this is why we go and talk to our teachers in Dokusan. In Dokusan, we go in and Dokusan is an interview with your teacher. So you go in and you present your thoughts and your questions and your understanding to the teacher. And the teacher's task is to present the bigger picture as it applies to you in particular. So we can listen to a lecture here, you can listen to this lecture, or any other kind of lecture, like if I was talking about, say, things like inherent existence, and I tried my best to cover all the bases concerning that topic, but it still didn't make sense to you. And you might come to me in Dokusan and say, well, if everything lacks inherent existence, and, I have a friend who shot somebody yesterday, does that mean it's okay to shoot other people because you don't like them? And then my job would be to say, well, no, that isn't okay, and here's why. So there's this way in which we hear these general observations about these descriptions about what the elephant is, but we also sometimes need to understand how the elephant fits in the context of our own lives. So that's why we go and talk to our teachers. So you might go to Jocko or I, if you're students at Ocean Gate, and ask us about something that is perplexing you, or even just come and say, this is what I heard in this lecture. Is this what you're talking about? So in Buddhism, we say, don't make up standards on your own. And the last one is that they were willing to fight about this. And this willingness to fight about this really gets back to our teachings about the doctrines of no inherent existing self, which does not mean you don't have a self. It gets back to this idea that not being attached to our particular point of view. And so we have to be careful about assuming that our assumptions about any given situation are correct, and that each person who felt that their assessment of what an elephant is was correct as far as their knowledge went. So I think we always have to question that, and about ourselves. So from the outside, looking at the story, we know that every one of those guys who was feeling the elephant was completely clueless about what an elephant looks like, because actually all of us have either seen an elephant in person. I have not. Well, I guess at the zoo. Or we've seen a picture of an elephant, so we know what elephants actually look like. So we know that their explanation is incomplete. And if we start fighting about it, then we realize that, and we're not open to this, and we realize and can feel how much suffering arises from this attachment to our particular point of view, even regardless often to contrary information that we might receive. So I'll just say that I am astounded at our ability as human beings to rationalize situations to fit our own notions of how we think things should be. COVID is a perfect example of people, they're rationalizing and coming up with all sorts of stories about either not getting vaccinated, or the one where people are taking some kind of medication intended for animals because it's supposed to help us cure COVID. So anyway, this is examples of human beings getting really attached to their particular viewpoint and story, their community story of this, and also just how we can rationalize in the face of contrary information and stay attached to our own point of view. Okay, so anyway, they all agreed to draw this picture based on the parts that they felt with their hands. So if they had cooperated, they still would not have been able to compile what it was an elephant actually looked like, although their curiosity and their openness might have caused them to come up with something that might have been close to what an elephant looked like. So, can we learn something from this story about how we understand our life? I'm hoping that all the things that I've said about this might help us learn something about how the story applies to our own lives. Having some skepticism about our stories is helpful. Asking ourselves, is there something I don't know? Is there something that I'm leaving out? Is there, I might, what's my own attachment to this? So I just will end by saying that I'm not trying to say that we're always wrong about things or that we are always self-serving about our understanding, but we should consider these possibilities. In particular, we should consider them if we're getting agitated and unhappy. I think that's a real key to looking at any situation and how we're responding to it. I'm also not saying that there is not any truth to a situation, because I think there is ways of looking at a situation that tells us something that is more truthful about a situation, even though the situation's complicated. And I'm saying that we should engage our critical minds about our own tendencies and that of others. So those are my thoughts about this story, about the blind man and the elephant. So thank you very much, everybody online, as well as folks here in the Zendo.